Welcome back, friends. The BGE team has a very special guest today. Please welcome Cliff Chiang. Cliff illustrated the Paper Girl comics and served as executive producer for the TV adaptation. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
We've been looking forward to it. So many questions.
Yes, we have been talking all things Paper Girls recently.
Yeah.
So, I guess we have to start at the beginning. What inspired the Paper Girls comic series?
Well, I reached out to Brian K. Vaughan about working together. We had done one comic like 20 years ago, and we had a great time working on it, but our schedules never matched up. And I asked him, as I was wrapping up on Wonder Woman, and he was, I think finishing up a TV show that he was working on. Do you have anything else? He's like, give me, I'll send you something. And I got the pitch for Paper Girls, and it was great. It was, it was so clear what, the characters and what the story was about, and there was so much potential to it. And because it took place in the 80s, when I was growing up, I knew that there was a lot that I could add to it, just in terms of making it feel lived in and authentic, and not like this kind of caricature that you often get at the 80s. I really wanted it to feel like almost journalistic in the way that, when you watch E.T., Spielberg kind of really gives you a snapshot of like 80s Southern California suburbs, and not this kind of generic, small town kind of thing, and, it was a really interesting pitch because, I hadn't really drawn a lot of kids. I wasn't sure, like, it doesn't seem, I think we're trained not to think of, you know, girl stories being necessarily commercial, and, so I was a little bit nervous, like, just because this is, for me, this is a business, right? And like, I was going into business with Brian on this story, and I was like, this seems not risky, but definitely less predictable.
Yeah.
And but that was also really exciting, and it was so cool to see this 80s formula of like, coming of age adventure tales with like a sci-fi twist, kind of how it gets flipped on its head when you have, female protagonists, and that was so interesting to me. And reading it, I realized that if I didn't draw it, I was going to be um, picking it apart if anybody else drew it, so to me that meant like, yeah, I had to jump in.
Absolutely. Yeah, you may as well get in there and have control over what it looks like, huh?
Yeah.
And as someone who grew up in the 80s too, you really did. You achieved your goal because it brought back like a lot of memories for me. And it really does feel lived in, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about my house and like my friends' houses, and and what we did, and like the things that we obsessed over, so it's all, trying to, while I could remember that stuff somewhat, clearly, try and re-immerse myself in being, 12 again.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Before it's too late.
Right.
I don't remember last year, so,
Honestly, for real.
I can't remember when I was 12, and it was like 13 years ago. So, how did you become a professional illustrator?
I always wanted to tell stories. I thought for a while, a brief moment, that I might be a filmmaker. But then, I had camera troubles, and then I realized I was going to have to deal with like a whole crew of people, and maybe not be writing stuff myself. And it's as I was getting back into comics, I had read them as a little kid, and then kind of fallen away from it. But I realized, if there was so much that you could do in comics, and that if by writing and drawing them, that maybe I could, kind of, you know, present kind of like a really cohesive vision, for a story. And so, uh, I kind of fell back in love with comics and realized that, this was the medium that I wanted to work in.
That's
I
awesome.
started working for Disney Adventures Comics, and then Vertigo, um, which was great. Vertigo Comics, DC's kind of imprint for Sandman and Hellblazer, and a lot of kind of stuff that was geared more for mature readers, a little bit more, adult and literary. Um, like that stuff really got me back into comics, and so it was a real honor to go and work there as as an assistant editor. My art wasn't really up to speed, and so I used that time to learn how comics are made from the other side of the desk. And while I was going home at night and continuing to kind of draw stuff on the side. And then after a couple of years realized that if I was going to do this, that I would have to go full time with it. There's a point where I couldn't really split my time that way,
Mhm.
and then I did that for a few years. Moved back home with my mom, to make sure that I could keep pursuing comics, even if they weren't, even if I wasn't getting a lot of work. Um, and then after a few years, it seemed to get a lot more stable. I was getting more work, and then I went just, after that, I, fully committed to, to being an artist. It was like a weird process. I didn't really think of myself as being an artist for a long time. And the kind of way my mindset had to change, versus being in an office and working for a company, and what your time is worth to that company, and where your allegiances lie. And then suddenly you're a freelancer, and everything you do
Freelancing's
is,
terrifying.
it really is. And it requires a shift in the way you think. So it took me a while, and it took me a while to embrace that identity.
Yeah.
It does sound, yeah, for sure.
I've done like
That's a,
freelance video production. There's no safety net.
Yeah.
And that's something hard that's to get over.
but that's awesome that you could move back with your mom and kind of make sure that it was a viable option for you and just build up your, you know, work
Yeah,
on it.
well,
And
I mean, also, I was living in New York, and that wasn't really going to be feasible
right.
rent-wise.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
It's like you can't just like afford a New York apartment in the middle of Manhattan for nothing.
Yeah, not a decent one.
He can afford this pizza box. Uh, so, what is your process for visualizing characters and scenes from scratch when developing a comic?
Um, with Paper Girls, I had Brian had already written kind of a character, brief character paragraph on each, and that was so it was so clear who those girls were and how they differed from each other, um, and you use that as your springboard, and you try to figure out like what of these personality traits you know um, can you make visual, like what communicates, so Mac's haircut, or what she's wearing, what any of the characters are wearing, like how that speaks to who they are and what their interests are. It's definitely like those are all specific choices, storytelling choices. And did a couple versions of that, but by and large, I think being the co-creator of it, and meant that I should put my stamp on it, and so once I had something I was happy with, I sent it to Brian, and he was like, "Yeah, this is great," and we just went from there. So there's something really nice about that, where unlike with other companies, you don't have to check in with anybody. You don't have to get permission on anything. It's like it's your idea and you can just run with it.
It sounds like a really good partnership too, because it can be really hard if you're working with other people, which, we found that too, working within fandoms and whatnot with other people. There's nothing like that relationship where you can just, exchange ideas and kind of have a trust there. So,
Yeah, I think going into it, you have to be open to the collaboration and knowing that you don't have and shouldn't have 100% control over something, and
mhm,
it's what the other person brings to the table, and you should invite that and encourage it. And Brian's been really great about that, from the beginning.
it's awesome.
I feel like it's so magical when you find someone that you work really well
Yeah,
with.
it is magical.
Like this podcast, Bree and Theora was like the first people we fully work well. And it's just so weird because you're like used to like group projects where one person does everything and yeah.
Or there's pettiness or whatever, and nobody's like openly sharing and openly, like giving and taking. Like you're putting your egos aside, I guess.
Yeah,
In some
it's
ways.
a partnership, it's a relationship, it's all those things that have to, and you really have to let, like, nobody wants to take orders, and it's not set up in that way, like it's not
Hmm.
meant to be that way. So, I think I think it's important, yeah, especially doing something creative to make sure that, if you're not doing all of it, then you have to let,
For sure.
it's not something you can control. It's sort of just like being on stage and like playing live music, and it's like you just jam, and it is what it is.
Hmm.
How long do you typically work on a comic for? Because like there's a lot of different illustrations, and if I was doing it, it would never get done. So
Right. You're talking about like an individual issue or like a whole
yes,
trade paperback.
like so maybe like both.
Yeah, I mean, we had a very strict schedule that I set from the beginning, probably because of my editorial background. We had about 6 weeks, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, per issue. Um, and usually, yeah, I think usually it took me about 6 weeks, and then to pencil and ink um, the issue, um, and then after say 5 issues were done, I would have about like a month buffer between finishing that issue and then starting um, the next book. Uh, so what helped there was like if I started to run behind on any of those issues, then it would be okay. I had about a month to between 4 or 5 issues to if I needed it.
Gotcha. So do you have any favorite illustrations from Paper Girls? Like parts that were the most fun for you to create?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of little moments that I really love, that I'm proud of. But that last issue, I think, is really um, some of my favorite stuff because it's so quiet and it just focuses on the girls, and and it's after all the sci-fi craziness, and we're just getting to spend time with them because it's the last issue and we're not going to see them anymore. So drawing them, smoking in like a little kid's playground, that was like an image that that came to me, like, I think the original script had them, like on a bridge, that was near, where Brian grew up, um, and just in the same way that maybe that bridge was sentimental to him, I was just remembering, being around that age or maybe a little bit older in high school, and being with friends and smoking cigarettes in like a elementary school playground, like that was a vivid memory for me, and I like the idea of that juxtaposition of the awkwardness of it, and how it really symbolized these girls being in between adults and being kids.
Yeah, I love that like the playground brought a juvenile aspect to it, because with stories, I feel like you can forget that kids are kids,
Yeah.
especially when they're like dealing with situations that aren't typical.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really cool. Another thing that I thought was really cool is that all 6 volumes of the comics, like, they all connect with the covers. So what made you decide to do that? Is that like a typical thing, or is this something unique?
It was, I kind of stumbled on it. I did the first volume not really planning any of it, the subsequent ones. And then when it came time to do the second one, I realized, I was trying to follow a certain amount of like the framing of the first one. Um, but all the covers, both the single issues and the trade paperback collections, are wraparound covers, so like the image continues onto the back, and and it was just a lot of space, and I was like, what can I do here? And I was like, oh, well, what if it somehow, like, there's a weird extension from the previous cover that that got cropped, and we just put that on the back, and then they can all kind of connect, but not in any like real important way, but just as a little kind of Easter egg more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
We love an Easter egg. Okay, so we have marveled amongst ourselves that the casting for the Paper Girls TV series was so spot on.
It blows my mind.
It's like crazy how much they inhabit. It's just like, I don't know. What was it like seeing people inhabit the characters you created the drawings from?
Yeah, it was very surreal. Again, yeah, the show would not have worked at all um, without without those girls being so good and so right for the roles. It if if they were like somehow like more like actory, that wouldn't have worked. Like they felt very genuine, and I think they were able to tap into the characters that we created, um, and with the scripts, the writing staff, they really, the showrunners, and they really honored kind of like the heart of what our story was, while at the same time pushing it in a different direction, or in adding things in order to to kind of fit the medium better. There's
Right.
certain things that we could do in comics that are necessitated by the format, but when you have 40 minutes, or an hour uh, of TV, like you can fit a lot more in there, and you want to spend time with those characters. So those stories end up changing, and the plot changes a little bit, and but you can fill it with all these really rich details, and they really did that in a way that wasn't exactly like to the letter of what we did, but I don't think that would have been interesting. Like we already have those comics, and to just film those, it would not make it. You have to let people do their take. We were just talking about this. It's a collaboration, and they have to feel empowered to do their best work. And if we're being like prescriptive about what they can do, it's just going to hem them in. And I think what we were so lucky to have with the show was this vehicle for people to kind of express themselves and their feelings about their childhoods, and growing older, and whatever disappointments they may carry, uh, and that's really poignant, and I'm glad that um, they were able to do that.
For
That's
sure.
great. Um, so another aspect of the show, we previously spoke with David J. Peterson and Jesse Sams, who worked with developing the spoken futuristic language in the Paper Girl series. How was the written language developed for the comic series? And is there a reason the conlang wasn't spoken as much as in the comics? Like
Yeah,
there
I
wasn't
don't
as much in the
know.
show?
Right. I mean, partly we didn't see that much of the teenagers, Heck and Naldo,
Oh yeah.
and so unfortunately, like that was something that we might have seen more of, in another season. For the comic, it was just a cipher, like it was just English, but with different letters, um, and so it wasn't. And it was like very conversational, 20th century English. So it wasn't like the weird kind of future, kind of more stilted future speak of the old timers.
Mm-hmm.
It was something a lot more casual and I guess more appropriately, kind of teenage sounding. So with with the show, I would have liked to have seen it more or done something, where we would have been able to see more where they came from.
That would have been really cool. We love the whole conlang.
We learned a lot about that stuff.
We did. We learned a lot because
you probably know more about it than I do.
Kaitlynn. We had a really long conversation with David and Jesse, and like still chat with them some once in a while. So it's just been really cool finding out what goes into that whole process. But so was there anything from the comics you wish had been adapted to the show?
The rest of it,
right?
There's so much.
Yeah, no, I mean there is a lot. I mean there was, and it was a definite, there are ways in which that first season covers a lot of ground, but then it also, we don't get to spend the time in the 80s that I kind of wish that we had a little bit more of, but you want to get to that high concept of them meeting their older selves a lot faster. So, I would have liked to have seen them in the 80s, just kind of going through, just being kids, before being thrown into the future and having to deal with that on top of everything else. But I mean, yeah, the rest of it would have been great, seeing some sort of prehistoric version of Cleveland, would have been.
Do you think Worry would have ever been in there if there were more seasons?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, going in the other direction, like you were talking about the little details that get added and give a lot of flavor for the characters, we really loved KJ's plotline where she gets to see her future self meet Lauren. So how did those changes develop when adapting Paper Girls to TV?
Yeah, I wish I could speak to that. All I know is when those scripts started coming in, I was jealous of them, of these ideas, because it was so great. It was something I wish we had done in the book. It was such a beautiful scene, when they're at the movie theater, and talking about being gay and the way that Lauren recognizes so quickly what KJ's talking about was just so heartbreaking and sincere, and like I really love that stuff. So we didn't explore as much of KJ in the book, and I think partly it's nice to leave something to the imagination. And because so much of her journey was about, in the book, was about figuring herself out in that moment, but her seeing her future self in the show, was a different way to kickstart that, reflection in her, and it works really, really nicely.
Yeah, I
think we talked for a good 40 minutes about
maybe an entire episode about that scene. We all just loved it so much because it was so relatable in the way that you sometimes almost have to speak in a code just because of the I guess importance and almost the
It's too
outside
big.
stigma attached. It's so big. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And in that time period, even more so because it was even from like 1988, even from 1995 to now, there's such a difference in the way you have those conversations. Because me growing up, we just had our talking about coming out episode, and we talked about the whole process for each of us. And Kaitlyn's a little younger than Theora and I, and so it was just a little bit. So it was just kind of so interesting because Theora and I's experience are so similar in that we were, graduating in the late 90s from high school and just going through the coming out process in that time. So it was so rewarding to see that on screen, and we're really glad that they did it. So
I'm only laughing because I was born in the late 90s.
Don't talk to me. Fine, I'm old. We'll move on.
No. Anyway, let me see where we are. Okay, so we've talked a lot about Paper Girls, and we still have more, but I want to know what your favorite or most challenging project you have worked on in your career.
I just finished it. It's called Catwoman Lonely City. It's a book that I wrote and drew and colored and lettered. So I did all of the different creative parts of it. And it's 4 issues, and the collected edition comes out in December, in mid-December. And I think if you like Paper Girls, I would say definitely give it a read. It's about an older Catwoman who has been in jail for 10 years after being put away for reportedly killing Batman, and after this really horrible night called Fool's Night in Gotham City that saw Batman and the Joker and Commissioner Gordon die. And so she comes back after 10 years of being in prison, and the whole city has changed. It's kind of clean and touristy, and people are spending a lot of money, but there's a lot of inequality, there's a lot of institutional racism, there's a lot of she comes back to a city that is over policed, with very militarized police officers who are now wearing kind of Batman-esque uniforms and things like that. So it's up to her to, she comes back and she's not quite sure where she fits in. And she's also trying to solve the mystery of Batman's dying words, which were "save the city," and in order to do that, she has to break into the Batcave. So it's one last heist for Selena Kyle, and and trying to find a crew to do that with. And when the city has changed and everybody's gotten older, it was. For me, it was very ambitious. I'm really proud of it. I think if you like Paper Girls, I think you'll enjoy it. There's and it's gay. There's gay stuff.
There's gay stuff for you. That's all you had to say. If you said that up front, we would be like pre-order.
Yeah, right. Well, I was holding off on it. I didn't want to.
You wanted it to be a surprise.
And the other stuff too.
No, it was all interesting. It really sounds, because in the Batman world, she was always my favorite character. So you already had me at Catwoman.
It's funny because like everybody likes to do that at the end, like, and it's gay. Like, right. Oh, okay, cool, I'm in. That's basically how we do our podcast. We're very simple people. Okay, so it seems like the story for the TV series of Paper Girls, you didn't have like a part in, really, like it was just based off of it. I don't know like what you're fully like what you did,
Yeah, well,
like how you're
we had,
rolling
yeah,
it.
Brian and I kind of decided early on, like we wanted to take a step back and let them do what they wanted to do. If they were going like, if they were doing something that we thought was really wrong, then maybe we'd say something, you
Mhm.
know. But for the most part, unless you're in the room working with them, then you're just another annoying person giving notes, and that's never good either, and how many, at what point do you burn off any goodwill and nobody wants to listen to you, so
Mm.
uh
Yeah.
it's, and all these things get, and whether or not, our notes then, what if, then the studio has notes and all this other stuff. So it would have
It's
just
such a
made,
big chain.
yeah, it just, it would have made things more difficult. So we just kind of
Mhm.
stepped back and said, we think these people are great. They're, they're really talented. Let's let them do what they do, and and let them loose. And and I think they really created something very unique, and that spoke to a lot of people. And I think that's the best, that's the best outcome that you can ask for. I think the show is really sticking with people in a way that, even though like it wasn't renewed, I
Which
think
is a
people,
crime.
yeah, but
Which is
people,
fine.
I think they really have, uh, like it's really personal to them, and that's awesome. It's like, anytime you make art, you want someone to feel, uh, you want someone to love it in that way.
Mhm. Yeah, we're thinking about making a citizen's arrest on that one.
I never know what's gonna come out of Bree's mouth. But I don't know if you'd know the answer to this, but something has been really bothering me. Do you know where KJ and Mac end up? Because I'm really upset that we don't get to see them at the end.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yes, I do. I do know where they end up.
So I'm guessing you can't tell
that
us.
reads to me that you can't tell us.
Yeah. They're okay. They're all right. They're alive.
They're okay.
They're alive. At least you know
No,
that,
they're
Kaitlynn.
they're in the they're in the past. They're in the far past.
That's where Theora thought they ended up.
Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was her theory.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I think they're, they wanted to follow some of the, the shape of the books as well. So,
It was such a big part of the comics, so I was really surprised that, because I did read them after seeing the show, and while I was reading, I was like, "This is so different." So, yeah, it would just, you have to put it in there somewhere.
but here's the question for the possible us forgiving people for crimes. Do you think there's a possibility that another network might pick it up, or do you know?
I don't know. I wish I knew. All this stuff is kind of like a crazy black box to me, where I don't know what happens
Mm-hmm.
inside of it. I do know that, yeah, they're shopping it around, and and they definitely feel like there's, from what I understand, there's interest, but I don't know what shape any of that
Gotcha.
interest
Mm-hmm.
is in, what they want and what they don't want from it. So, unfortunately, I can't really say like what they, where it would go or what would happen to it.
If we had a network, we'd pick it up.
Right.
Oh yeah, like I really want us to create the big gay network in the future, so we can just save all
Kaitlynn
the
wants to
shows.
take over the world. Basically, you should probably
World
you're going to be like an
domination.
evil villain at some point. This is what this is about.
It's just, it was so good, and like the actresses, they just embodied the characters so beautifully. Like Fina just perfectly took on the coming out, like her facial expressions, the way she said things. Yeah, this is why our Paper Girls episode turned into 4 episodes.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be 1, but it turned into 4.
Nice.
But when I was doing some research for the interview, I saw that you did an interview with Harvard Magazine where you said the hunt to find the next one, talking about comic books, made you really savor each issue when you got it. The wait made it this very mysterious thing that you could never have all at once. You only got a piece of it at a time, which just made you a bigger addict. So the question is, do you think the outcome would have been different if Paper Girls was released weekly instead of all at once?
That is really hard to know. My part of me suspects, yeah, that the the binge model only works almost accidentally for certain things, you know? I mean, if you look at a
Mhm.
lot of shows now, they're not dropped all at once. Or if they are, um, once they're successful, they are not dropped all at once, you know? So, for Paper Girls, I think, you know, we definitely would have benefited from it coming out and the word of mouth being good, you know, because not everybody wants to sit down and watch 8 hours, 10 hours of TV in one weekend, you know?
Or they do, and then it's just over. And even if it
Yeah.
Mhm.
gets renewed, you have to wait over a year.
Yeah. So, you know, I think, you know, and actually, if you like something, sometimes you want to savor it too and you want to spread it
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's great that it can be there for people to enjoy however they want, but it's not great if you're going to then, you know, say, you know, if you're not going to give things time to grow.
Yeah, I don't think it's
Yeah.
great for building an audience.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just kind of
No.
expecting people to find it, you
Mhm.
know, and then hope that it it's like a
Also, if you
massive
don't
word
actually
of mouth
market
hit.
it that well, just
Yeah.
saying. I'm not over this. Okay, can you tell? Because
She's
when you
bitter about it.
release, yes, very. When you release everything at once, there's only one push on social media, really. Like,
Yeah.
there's like one thing, and then it goes down. But if it's every week, then people keep hearing about it, and then it'll go up and up and up, and it just makes no sense. And I think that's why people are starting to not do it all at once anymore, because they realize it doesn't work anymore. I feel like a good thing is like the 3 episodes all at once and then weekly. I feel
Mm.
like that model works really well.
Yeah, I
I
like
think a
that
lot
one
about
too.
this.
She does. But anyway, so you were part of creating the most important comic book on Earth. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. You know, it's about climate change and the the proceeds of the book, you know, go towards really you know, towards you know, saving, you know, certain trees and putting, you know, towards um, real initiatives to prevent like the extinction of species and things like that. So it it's definitely about, you know, not just, you know, educating people or dramatizing, you know, the effects of climate change on the planet, but also about like making sure that the book has an impact on the planet as well. You know, that it actually does something, or that the money that is raised by it goes somewhere towards actually doing something.
It's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really,
It's
really fun.
I love when media, like any form of it, does something good, because I'm always talking about how powerful it is, and not in and sometimes it is used for really good things, but yeah, so I just love positive things. But I have one last thing about Paper Girls the show, because it is so different from the comics. Is there something that, besides like the KJ thing that we talked about, that you loved that was adapted, that you weren't like really expecting? Like, what was your favorite part of it?
Um, I mean, my other favorite part probably was Mac's brother Dylan, who, you know, we only had very much on the periphery in the book, and you know, it's the I really appreciated being able to see the flip side of their, you know, of these girls time traveling and not knowing what happens. And then, so, in the book, we focus on Mac and how she takes the news, but like the idea of like what her loss means to her family, is also really interesting and heartbreaking. And, and I think I was thinking a lot about, I just love the scenes between them and the dynamic and this idea that you get to, you know, see a lost, someone that you lost, seeing them again, like what that would do to you. And then, and then it kind of haunted me later to think that like, she had to leave and then she was gone again from Dylan's life, like what is that? It's almost like, did he imagine it? So
Yeah.
it's really heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
We talked about that too. Like,
Yeah.
she didn't even get to say goodbye. And
Yeah, I know.
it's so sad.
Intense. Those were really great scenes.
I didn't even get to see like what happened.
Yeah.
I was hoping that if we ever got, or if we were gonna get more seasons, that we'd get to see what happened with Dylan, because that couldn't have been easy. I mean, like, and he wasn't the only one who saw her. Like, the kids also saw her.
Right.
So that means that he wasn't crazy, but he's probably, like, looking everywhere for her. Yeah. It's just, it's a lot. But we've made it, you've made it past all the hard, open-ended questions. Now we've gotten to the fun section of Would You Rather.
Okay.
But we're not saying that they're going to be easy.
Probably more fun for us in the audience, but because you have to make some hard choices.
All right.
There's one question in particular that was all for, but
I think before we get to the second question, I think we need to explain the origin story. But so the first one is, would you rather fight the Time War for the STF or the Old Watch?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, certainly the way the show is, you want to work for you want to be on the side of the STF. But I think, probably with more seasons, we would have seen a little bit more of why the Old Watch is so, concerned about the timeline. So, maybe they would have had a convincing argument, but maybe not, but certainly for the book, you definitely want to be on the teenager side.
Yeah. I mean,
Bree, would you like to do the second one as well?
Okay, good.
Or do you want me to? I will do it.
No,
I will do it. But like, this was your question at first.
Listen, there's a reason we asked this question. It's just a kind of a funny backstory from when we were covering Motherland for Salem. But basically,
just say would you rather? First. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Would you rather get the sex talk from Aaron,
older Aaron,
Prioress, or grandfather? Like the birds and the bees.
Wow. It's really funny because I kind of, right, as characters or as like people, like those actors.
Oh, as the characters.
Yeah, I would definitely talk to any of those actors about it. They'd be hilarious.
Oh my gosh, that
it would be hilarious.
I'm just thinking of it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think out of the three characters, maybe I'd want to talk to grandfather. I think because Paris is so cold, and she's like a Terminator, and then so I'm not sure how useful that conversation might be.
Mm-hmm.
And then older Erin seems like she might get flustered more easily talking about it, and whereas like grandfather would just be kind of like pretty chilled out and matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like older Aaron wouldn't like actually get to anything.
That's why I want older Aaron, because it would be amusing.
Oh, there's that question always brings up some very interesting answers no matter what show it goes to.
Sweet
The
hells.
other two are very tame. That was the only untamed one.
I blame
fine.
Taylor Hickson.
Yes. Who would you rather have as your younger sister? Tiffany, Erin, KJ, or Mac?
Wow. Yeah. Let's see. Tiffany, KJ. I think, yeah, I probably wouldn't be able to handle a Mac.
That's
like,
very fair.
let's see. I think Erin's probably too much like myself, so that I don't need, I don't think that would be interesting. Um, I don't know. I think I'm gonna go with Tiffany. I think it'd be interesting to have to have a younger sibling like her who's so driven, and
Mm-hmm.
to be like, and to see like how you can help, um, help that person achieve what they want, and what you can do, for them. But I guess that's more like being a teacher than than being like an older sibling. But yeah, I'm gonna go with that.
Be careful what you wish for. I was that younger sibling. I was just
Yeah,
called annoying a lot.
right. I think younger siblings get
Well,
called that a lot anyway.
yeah, that's just like any younger sibling. Really? Well,
No, I just
yeah.
got told I made them feel stupid a lot. Not my fault.
I mean, fair enough. Okay. If you were to time travel, would you rather visit the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, or prehistoric time period?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm gonna go with the 90s.
Oh.
Yeah, I feel like the 80s, like technology wise, like feels like so different now that I don't know if I could, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of amenities, wouldn't be around. Um, the 90s, you know, uh, it's when I was in high school and college. I think I could kind of make my way around a little bit easier. And the 2000s is just too recent. That just doesn't feel like
Right.
that's just, yeah, that's, um, and prehistoric times would just not be good. It's just, I think we underestimate
Absolutely.
how hard,
Probably
life,
get eaten by a
daily life
dinosaur.
is.
Or something.
Yeah. Right.
There's
Or
probably.
some crazy, like, bacteria that just,
I was about to say,
Yeah.
you would get killed by the bacteria or viruses or whatever before any of that, I would think. But
Yeah, if Theora was here, she would list out a bunch of different things. She's an infectious disease specialist.
pharmacist.
Pharmacist.
I think you made the correct choice because I would go back to that time period just to like know everything that we know now about technology. And you're at the cusp of when everything became like mass, when we first got the internet everywhere and everybody had computers, started to have computers, and cell phones started to actually be, not gigantic at some point in the late 90s. So absolutely, I'm with you on that one.
I'd go back to the 80s or 90s just to know what Bree's talking about half the time.
Oh, for goodness sake. Listen.
We love each other. But thank you for telling us so much. But do you have any final words that you want to tell our listeners before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I just, would want to say like thanks for, for reading the books and watching the show and like, really embracing it. I think it's, again, I think we tried to do something that felt genuine, and sincere, and, and really tried to take a look at, kind of the interior life of young girls, but in the framework of this sci-fi, adventure. And I'm just so grateful for having, the opportunity to, to to be a part of something that, that made people really so happy.
Well, thank you for creating this with your partner in crime, because it really was an amazing journey, and we really, really hope that somebody picks it up for the TV show.
For the love of everything, please.
And that more people read the books, and maybe that would help more people to find the comics. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
And to everyone at home listening, make sure to check out Paper Girls, the TV show and the books, and follow Cliff on Twitter at Cliff Chiang. CLI. We'll just link it below.
Yes. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
And with that, we've been Big Gay Energy. If you like this episode, check out all of our other episodes right here on YouTube. Please like, leave a comment below, and subscribe for more amazing and super gay content.
Until next time, stay safe and hydrate for lesbian Jesus.